good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Rich Clark, Guide to the Right Path. Now, I've been talking about relationships and I've been talking about dating, pre-engagement, engagement, and marriage. And I'm now going to talk about the unfortunate thing is what does happen to some marriages is divorce. As you can see, these couple are arguing between me. You imagine it's like it's my head and I'm doing this. And that guy's there. I've been that therapist, sat there, well, couples are going, I hate you, and you get it. And you have to really be very calm and have to not take sides, and you've just got to be that happy conduit and medium in the middle. So I'm going to explain again problems, what leads to divorce, and solutions, perhaps before divorce happens, or actually the solutions is that divorce has to happen. So again, I'm just going to explain it from the perspective as a therapist, because I do CBT, hypnotherapy, and psychotherapy. So what leads to divorce? So divorce is the legal dissolution of marriage. Common factors include persistent unresolved conflict. Now, I've talked about this about communication, but this conflict of coming and forth, destructive communication patterns, after a while it gets to that head and one partner just says, I've had enough. Or they both go, I can't live with you anymore, blah, blah, blah. That's it. Now, persistent unresolved conflict. How does this get sorted? Well, that is, as a therapist, you would work out the cognitive behavior therapy of what is triggering them to keep getting in conflict. What is that result? What is that around? Now, I would say most unresolved conflict is bad communication problems, trust issues, and work-life balance, and maybe intimacy challenges. You do hear about family interference, but again, most of that can be dealt with. So the solution to that is going to have CBT, changing the way you feel and how you actually respond to the relationship and why you get around it. Hypnotherapy, you go into the timeline and find out where these problems were and why they've happened, what was the actual cause effect of that to happen, and why this keeps becoming a conflict. And then if you can reframe it, great. Maybe it makes the couple not want to get divorced, or it can do the opposite where they actually say, well, we don't want to reframe it. We don't want to do anything about it. We just want to divorce. And there could be many different reasons. It usually something comes up within the sessions and then someone goes, oh, wow, okay, that's how you feel. And that does happen. The big one, the mainly divorce, 70% of it, infidelity. Now, infidelity, I think, is also leads to someone's also their precondition or programming to do that. They feel unloved, unsatisfied. There's issues with that, trauma they're going through. But also, I would say intimacy issues as well is the mismatched sexual desires, lack of emotional connection, or physical intimacy problems. This can actually happen quite a lot when someone, a partner has had a child and they don't feel the intimate sexual desires like they did when they were single or before they had a child. That happens quite a lot. Again, what's the resolution? Find out what the infidelity is and whether the couple are willing to get past it and keep the marriage going. And if they're not, then it leads to divorce. And how do they get through that? What does that mean? The infidelity could be that the other partner feels that this person they've had the infidelity with is actually, they feel that's going to be a better relationship. And in that respect, as much as it's hurtful, we have to understand that, people are individuals and it may just be that's what happens. And then that's where it comes into the next part, financial incompatibility. So financial incompatibility does happen a lot and financial disagreements. So the different spending habits, the hidden debt, disagreements over financial priorities. And this incompatibility is that sometimes it be that one person's earning all the money and the other isn't. And it creates a resentment issue, or that they're both wanting to be career people, but one's being dragged back because they're having to be the house person to look after the house or looking after the children, or they're having to keep more at home for certain reasons because someone could be ill. These are things what do happen in marriages which leads to divorce. However, again, if we want the solution to do that, find out the cognitive behavior therapy. What is it? What causes this incompatibility? Why does the person who wants to do in the career, why don't they want to go any further and do well? Why is it that someone wants to only be at home and doesn't want to work? There's many things. Again, it all is down to the individuals. However, that's something to look into. This one, substance abuse. And I think actually we're going to substance abuse, we're going to alcoholism as well. Very big thing. Dealt with it a few times with clients. And it's soul destroying. It can destroy families, children, families, all in the intermediate families, extended families, everything. And the only way with that is with substance abuse is that person, if they've got that, has to go to rehab. Can they get around it? Very difficult for some people if their drug abuse or their alcohol abuse is is large. Also, the person will have to want to stop. That's very hard as well because a lot of people do not. Now, as a therapist, would I work with people with substance abuse? Well, we're actually taught as hypnotherapists and CBT therapists, we can't work with people who are under the influence of drugs. If they are clean in between that time, yes, we can. But if they're on drugs, we cannot, because when you're opening the portal to the mind, certain things happen. And I can tell you that from experience when I've worked with somebody who decided to didn't lied and told me they hadn't taken ketamine, and I was working with them online. And that was like a minefield of imagine like opening the door to a fun house and then every crazy animal and crazy creature comes out. It was nuts. So that's why we don't work with people who are on drugs or have a drug problem. That is where they go to a professional in a rehab center or so forth. Do I believe rehab centers work? I think they can work. I think a lot of it is the individual actually wants to stop the abuse of substance or alcoholism. And I think that a lot of people do not. They just do it because they've been caught or they've caused a problem and they go to it because of a court order, but it doesn't mean they actually want to change. So I think it's very much, and I can see why that would lead to divorce. And it has. I've seen it with clients, how that works. So yeah, it's a lot of work. That's probably one of the toughy ones to get through. Domestic violence or abuse. Now, I've worked with people who have done that, and that can be very challenging because also when someone wants to leave their partner because of that, some people have actually, before the marriage, they weren't abusive, and then when they get into married, they end up in this really abusive relationship. It happens a lot, and I've worked with people, or say, we only work with women who have been victims of that, and it's very, very emotional. You're dealing with, and you've got to, when they're talking to you and asking you things, and they're kind of in accommodation, or some family members to look at them, or they're kind of on the move, and worse if they've got kids. It can be very damaging. So domestic violence or abuse, that would be working with the person who is the abuser or the one who's abused. And sometimes the person's been abused and they know that person who is the abuser will not change. You have to change their factor and their mindset of that they don't want to be with that abuser anymore. And that can be very difficult because it could be they are coming from a background where they've seen abuse and they think it's okay, it's normal. So you have to work with that. And that's timeline therapy and going back and finding that trauma and resolving it. So that would be my solution to that. Irres, irrecon- I can't even say this word. Irreconcilable differences in values or life goals. Yeah, so obviously I don't use that word very often. It's my R's and the S's and the close and the cur. So anyway, so irreconcilable differences in values or life goals is bad that leads to divorce. I personally think that's something in a relationship, but I think it should always be spoken about in communication. And I think it can be resolved. I don't think these should lead to divorce, but some people just feel that they're not the same path anymore. And obviously, I call myself guide to the right path, so I always want people on their right path. And life goals can change. Sometimes you feel that someone's going to get better. You're in a relationship and then you get married and you think they're going to get better, and they don't. They just keep going into their bad patterns. And sometimes they need that kick up the bum to change. Maybe actually just to get the divorce proceedings, and then they think, right, I'm going to change, and they do. And sometimes that leads to like scrapping the divorce or scrapping the proceedings of that. Because divorce is expensive and it can be very messy, especially when it comes to the value of things. Yeah, that'll be another thing. Why? I want this. I want the dog. I want the house. You hear it. And I'll tell you now, there's a part of you that has to listen to it and go, oh my God, this is so bad. Why are these people ever married in the first place? And there's other parts, they say things which make you laugh, like, I want this set of spoons, or I want these plates. And you think, plates? You're arguing about a plate? Or a plate, or a bank account? You'd be surprised. People are very good, and they're vicious with it as well. So yeah, I would say, again, see if they do therapy, see if they can get matching with their life goals and values. Sometimes it's difficult. Again, both of the partners have to be wanting to do it. So it's very important. Loss of love or emotional connection. And I think this goes down to intimacy challenges, communication problems, and just unresolved personal issues as well. And then just growing apart. It happens. Loss of love or emotional connection can happen. Sometimes you feel this person was the right person and it just doesn't work. And so the solution would be, again, you can ask the couple if they want to do that, work with that. Again, both of them have to want to work with it, not just one, and then just see if that can change. And sometimes just give it time, instead of just going for the divorce, try and change it. I would say if both parties are willing to change, that can change. If they're not, it's very much going to lead to divorce or lead to separation. So again, this is what a lot of it is that divorce actually can be stopped, but it's about that both parties want to stop it. It's incredibly important. Next one, marry too young or for the wrong reasons. Well, people get married for visas. People get married too young because they thought their social conditioning was, oh, get married young and oh, you love each other and you've known each other for years since you were teenagers, so we'll get married. Well, where's your experience? That's the thing. When you get married too young, you don't really have the experience. And you see this with actually one of the worst sports players is football players or soccer players, as you would say in America, or American football players or basketball players. They get married so young. They go to college and they get married to like their high school sweetheart, and these are like young men who then get loads of money, and then they're just like they've got everything thrown at them, and they must be very difficult to like not be attached to that or not deal with that, and they because they haven't really had a life. And so, do I believe, a personal belief, do I believe people get married too young is not a good thing? I'm kind of in the middle of the fence of that one. I think sometimes getting married too young is not a good idea. I think sometimes having a bit of experience. I personally think that the youngest you should get married is about 25. And I think that's because you have enough experience. Yeah, 25, I think is fine. And if you can, I would say get married at 30 because I think then you're more career driven. You know who you are. You know what you've done. You've done a bit of your own independent work. You've done a lot of like sovereign, you're knowing yourself, done therapy perhaps, learn what you want to be. And then again, you're always willing to change. But being married too young can just be really detrimental. So again, that would be therapy with that. Find out why someone got married too young. What was the pressures of that? Why did they feel they had to get married young? And for the wrong reasons, well, that's about both coming in and finding out why did they get married in the first place. Was it a shotgun marriage, or was it this, or they want to keep someone in the country, a visa, and then the person got the visa, and then they just started to, get drift apart. Again, always about the intention of why someone wants to do something. And that again is communication. Again, the communication, then the trust issues, and then the financial disagreements all work within that. And the last one about divorce is lack of commitment or effort to repair the relationship. And this, I think, is probably the biggest one why it leads to divorce. If they're coming to me as a therapist and only one of them is more engaged than the other, that's already a red flag to me as a therapist because I'm thinking, wow, I'm going to work with these people, but one is dragging their feet. Now, actually, what sometimes happens, and this does happen sometimes, the person who says they want to do the therapy, they're the one who thinks they've got the partner's got the problem. It's actually sometimes they have the problem. And they've created issues and they want to repair the relationship. And then when it comes got to face the conflict of what the problems are, they struggle with it. Oh no, I don't want to deal with that today. I don't no. If you want to repair a relationship, you both have to have the intention to want to repair the relationship. And that commitment, the fear of commitment I will talk about sometime this week, you'll see the video of it, is imperative. What is it you want to change? What is it you want to develop and grow? And that is got to be that you want to repair this. And that is going through therapy. And therapy will do that. Find out your timeline. Why do you want to repair the relationship? What's how become the lack of commitment? What has caused this to get to this point that you want divorce? And find that out. So that's the divorce. Now, I'm going to talk about annulment. Now, annulment may be very rare. It differs from divorce, and that declares a marriage null and void, and it's usually never legally existed. And I'm not going to really talk about the problem. I'm just going to talk about the problems and the solutions because you kind of get that because I think it's quite obvious. So, if annulment happens, it's fraud or misperception, hiding major facts like prior marriages or children. Again, it all goes down to communication problems and financial difficulties, and then obviously trust. So this again is all the same as what I've mentioned in the main issues in relationships and marriages, and what I've just said about in divorce. The same solutions to that. One spouse was already married to someone else. Bigamy does happen a lot. I also we hear people who are in what they call polyamorous relationships. So they end up that they're in a polyamorous relationship, which can be with loads of people, and then they realize actually, oh, I want to be married to this person, and they still realize they're still having a polyamorous relationship. And there's a lot of people do this, and then people go, oh, it's okay, but some people don't. I mean, that's why I never understand how somebody can get married to 5 wives or multiple wives. I just think, oh, just have the one. Like, or one partner, or you make sure that you make that very clear that there is scope for things to change. Yeah, there's a lot. There's some people just they don't make their lives easy, in my opinion. But there you go. One spouse was underage and lacked parental consent. That happens a lot, and we know this has happened. And actually, the laws are changing to this because there's so many laws where religions and different things have done. I mean, actually, in France, I think they only changed it about 3, 4 years ago that you could actually marry a 14-year-old. I think in the New York states there was some communities. I think they were Jewish. I think they could get children as young as soon as they had their first period. I mean, it's crazy to think that this actually still exists in the 21st century, but it does. And that's where, again, that's social conditioning, culture, religion, all these things. So again, as a therapist, we really can't do much about that. That's something we can only help the person after that's happened. And so actually, I've worked with people who've had annulments, actually worked with them to get them through their therapy, with therapy, to then actually get them into better relationships for the future. I think that's what probably when most of my stuff has been about, was linked to annulment. Mental incapacity or inability to consent, that can be sometimes people do that. They sometimes find that they misuse someone. The marriage was never consummated. That's sometimes because people get married in certain countries and that law doesn't apply to their country, where they're from or whatever. So again, complicated. But again, people sometimes spare the moment, shotgun weddings, or I'll get married here, but then they didn't get it signed properly or whatever. Marriage performed under duress or by force does happen. That could be arranged marriages, forced marriages. Me personally, don't believe in that. I believe in arranged marriages if that's the right thing and it's done correctly. But forced marriages, I don't believe in. I think that's wrong. I think it's a terrible thing to do. I think you should never force anybody under duress or by force. I think it's a form of coercion, and I think it's incredibly, for men to do that to women is very misogynistic. I think it's terrible. So yeah, I'm not a fan of that. Marriage between close relatives, incest. Well, this I think can actually happen more than people realize, because some people end up that they don't know who their father is, or they don't know their mother is, and they've been brought up by adoptive parents or something, and then they meet someone and they think, oh, we're so alike, and then they find out things, and sometimes, but really, again, that should all be communication. All trust issues, that should all be found out before you get married. But most people don't always realize, and that's because so many people used to hide records and did things. So it's a very complicated situation. However, it can get resolved, but very difficult. So anyway, if any of these issues, or you are worried about these issues, or you're worried about something could lead to divorce, or if you're actually getting over an annulment, or you feel something has happened to get to an annulment, but you also want therapy to help you with that, please contact me at www.richclark.net. And with that, please, when you do that, it's a free discovery call, which is 30 minutes. We find out what your issues are, and then we work out whether you can go to a mini session for £55 for 40 minutes to find out if we work as well as a therapist and client, or we actually set a program for you and how that can work. And sometimes that can become sometimes a bit more ad hoc for certain things, because some people find out there's more issues with what they've got. But mostly we try and keep things as narrowed as we can, because people want to see change quickly, they want to see it progress, and they want to see things move on. So until next time, I shall speak to you soon.